The planet Zerath-7 was not a kind place. It was a world of jagged cliffs, dense jungles, and endless storms that battered everything in their path. The air was thick with humidity, making every breath feel like a struggle. For the soldiers of Earth's United Defense Force, it was hell, and yet they had no choice but to fight here. The Vryn, an alien race with scaly gray skin, glowing yellow eyes, and weapons far more advanced than anything humanity possessed, had claimed this planet as their stronghold. If the humans wanted any chance at survival, they would have to take it back. Ryan Carter crouched behind a moss-covered rock, his rifle steady in his hands. He was a sniper, one of the best in the platoon. His dark brown hair was matted with sweat and his face was streaked with dirt. Despite the chaos around him, he remained calm. Years of training had taught him how to stay focused even when death seemed just moments away. Through the scope of his rifle, he scanned the area ahead. The supply depot loomed in the distance, a massive structure made of sleek black metal that gleamed under the dim light of Zerath-7's twin suns. This was their target. "Carter, you seeing anything?" came a voice over his earpiece. It belonged to Laura Dawson, the captain of their squad. She was young for her rank, barely into her 30s, but she carried herself with an authority that demanded respect. Her voice was sharp, clipped, and always professional. "Negative," Ryan replied quietly. "No movement outside the perimeter, yet they're probably waiting for reinforcements." "Reinforcements we can't afford to let them get," Laura said. "We hit hard and fast or we don't hit at all. You ready?" Ryan exhaled slowly, steadying his breathing. "Ready." The plan was simple, or at least as simple as plans could be on a battlefield like this. The platoon would split into two teams. One team, led by Laura, would breach the depot through the front entrance, creating enough noise and destruction to draw the attention of the Vryn guards inside. Meanwhile, Ryan and 3 others would circle around to the rear, planting explosives on the fuel tanks stored there. Once the charges were set, they'd signal the retreat and everyone would meet back at the extraction point half a kilometer away. From there, a dropship would pick them up and whisk them off the planet before the Vryn could regroup. It sounded straightforward enough, but nothing ever went according to plan on Zerath-7. The first explosion rocked the ground beneath Ryan's feet. That was Laura's team, kicking things off exactly as scheduled. Smoke billowed into the sky, followed by the sharp crackle of plasma fire. The Vryn weren't going down without a fight. Ryan adjusted his grip on his rifle and motioned for his teammates to follow him. They moved quickly, staying low to avoid detection. The jungle around them buzzed with life, or what passed for life on this alien world. Strange insects chirped in the trees, and vines hung like curtains across their path. Every step felt like walking through molasses, the thick air clinging to their skin. When they reached the rear of the depot, Ryan signaled for silence. He peered through his scope again, searching for signs of enemy activity. There were 2 guards patrolling near the fuel tanks, their movements slow and methodical. Easy targets. Ryan lined up his shot, holding his breath as he squeezed the trigger. The first guard dropped instantly, a clean headshot. The second turned toward the sound, confused, but Ryan didn't give him time to react. Another shot rang out, and the second guard collapsed beside his companion. "Clear," Ryan whispered into his comms. His teammates nodded, moving forward to plant the explosives. Everything was going smoothly, too smoothly. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. He kept scanning the area, his finger hovering over the trigger of his rifle. Then it happened. A deafening roar filled the air as a swarm of Vryn reinforcements descended from the sky. Their ships looked like giant insect wings, shimmering with iridescent colors as they hovered above the depot. Plasma bolts rained down, forcing Ryan and his team to dive for cover. Explosions tore through the jungle, sending chunks of earth flying in every direction. Ryan gritted his teeth, trying to block out the chaos. He needed to stay focused. Lives depended on it. "Dawson," he shouted into his comms. "We've got company." Static greeted him at first, then Laura's voice cut through the noise. "Fall back to the extraction point. Repeat, fall back now." Ryan cursed under his breath. They hadn't finished setting the charges yet. If they left now, the mission would fail. But arguing with Laura wasn't an option, not with the Vryn closing in from all sides. Reluctantly, he signaled for his team to pull out. As they retreated, Ryan covered their backs, picking off any Vryn who dared to chase them. His aim was flawless, each shot finding its mark. But even the best sniper couldn't hold off an entire army forever. Halfway to the extraction point, disaster struck. A stray plasma bolt grazed Ryan's leg, searing through his armor and leaving a deep gash in his flesh. Pain shot through him like lightning, and he stumbled, nearly falling to the ground. One of his teammates, a medic named Jake, rushed to his side. "You good?" Jake asked, already pulling out a med kit. "I'll live," Ryan muttered, though he wasn't sure if that was true. Blood soaked through his pants, and every step sent fresh waves of agony coursing through his body. Still, he forced himself to keep moving. Stopping meant dying. By the time they reached the extraction point, the situation had gone from bad to worse. The dropship was already there, its engines roaring as it prepared to take off. Laura stood near the ramp shouting orders to her remaining soldiers. Bodies littered the ground around her, both human and Vryn. Ryan's heart sank as he realized just how many of their team hadn't made it. "Get on board," Laura yelled when she saw them approaching. Jake helped Ryan limp toward the ship, but before they could reach the ramp, another wave of Vryn reinforcements appeared on the horizon. Laura hesitated, glancing between Ryan and the approaching enemies. Then, with visible reluctance, she made her decision. "We can't wait," she called out. "Leave him." Ryan froze, staring at her in disbelief. "What? No. There's too many of them," Laura snapped. "If we don't leave now, none of us will make it out alive." "But," Jake started to protest, but Laura cut him off. "That's an order, soldier. Get on the damn ship." For a moment, no one moved. Ryan's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. These were his comrades, the people he'd fought alongside for years. How could they just abandon him like this? "Go," Ryan finally said, his voice hoarse. "I'll hold them off." Jake hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty and duty. In the end, though, he obeyed Laura's command, climbing onto the dropship with the rest of the survivors. Ryan watched as the ramp closed, sealing him outside. The engines roared louder, and within seconds, the ship lifted off the ground, disappearing into the clouds. Ryan stood there for a long moment, clutching his rifle tightly. His leg throbbed with pain and his vision blurred at the edges. Betrayal burned in his chest hotter than the wound in his leg. He had trusted these people. He had risked his life for them time and time again. And now, they had left him to die. But Ryan wasn't ready to die just yet. He limped into the shadows of the jungle, disappearing from view as the sounds of battle faded into the distance. Somewhere deep inside, a spark of determination ignited. If they wanted a war, he would give them one. But this time, it wouldn't just be against the Vryn. This time, it would be personal. And so began the legend of the ghost sniper, the man who refused to be forgotten. Ryan Carter's breath came in shallow gasps as he stumbled deeper into the jungle. His injured leg burned with every step, and his vision blurred from both pain and exhaustion. The wound on his thigh was severe, deep enough to leave him unable to walk properly, but not so bad that it would kill him outright. At least not yet. He pressed a hand against the makeshift bandage wrapped around his leg, trying to slow the bleeding. It wasn't much, just a strip of fabric torn from his uniform, but it was all he had. The jungle around him was alive with sounds, chirping insects, rustling leaves, and the occasional distant roar of some unseen predator. Ryan tried to focus on those noises instead of the anger boiling inside him. Betrayal. That was the word that kept circling in his mind like a vulture waiting for its prey to die. They left me behind. His own squad, the people he'd trusted with his life, had abandoned him without a second thought. Laura Dawson's voice echoed in his head. "Leave him." Ryan clenched his teeth and pushed forward. He couldn't let himself dwell on it now. Survival came first. If he didn't find shelter soon, the Vryn, or worse, the creatures that prowled this alien world, would finish what they started. He scanned the area, looking for somewhere safe to hide. The dense foliage offered plenty of cover, but it also made it hard to move quickly. Every step felt like dragging a lead weight through mud. After what felt like hours, Ryan spotted a cluster of large rocks jutting out of the ground. Between them was a narrow crevice, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. He limped toward it, checking for signs of danger before crawling inside. The space was cramped and damp, but it would do. For now, at least. He leaned back against the cold stone, letting himself rest for a moment. His rifle rested across his lap, ready to fire if needed. As the adrenaline faded, the full weight of his situation hit him. He was alone. No backup, no supplies, no hope of rescue. Just him, his rifle, and the endless jungle. Ryan closed his eyes, taking slow, deliberate breaths to calm his racing heart. Panic wouldn't help him survive. He needed to think clearly, to focus on what mattered most: staying alive. The next morning brought little relief. The sun, or rather, the twin suns of Zerath 7, rose slowly above the horizon, casting an eerie orange glow over the landscape. Ryan woke up stiff and sore, his leg throbbing worse than ever. He unwrapped the bandage carefully, wincing as fresh blood oozed from the wound. It wasn't healing well, and infection was a real possibility if he didn't clean it soon. But water was scarce, and he couldn't afford to waste any on himself until he found more. He crawled out of the crevice, scanning the area cautiously. The jungle seemed quiet, almost too quiet. Ryan knew better than to trust silence here. Predators could be lurking anywhere, watching, waiting. Still, he needed food and water if he wanted to last more than a few days. Using his rifle as a crutch, he hobbled toward a nearby stream he'd spotted the day before. The water looked murky and uninviting, but it was better than nothing. Kneeling beside the stream, Ryan cupped his hands and scooped up some water. He drank greedily, ignoring the metallic taste that lingered on his tongue. Then he used the last of his bandage to soak up some water and clean his wound. It stung like hell, but he gritted his teeth and kept going. When he was done, he tore another strip of fabric from his uniform and tied it tightly around his leg. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. As he worked, Ryan's thoughts turned to revenge. It wasn't just the Vryn who had wronged him. It was his own people, too. Laura Dawson's face flashed in his mind again, her expression cold and calculating as she ordered the dropship to leave without him. She hadn't even hesitated. Ryan clenched his fists, feeling the rage build inside him once more. They thought he was dead already. They probably assumed the jungle or the Vryn would take care of him. What they didn't realize was that they had made a terrible mistake by leaving him alive. Ryan had always been good at surviving. Growing up in a rough part of Chicago, he'd learned early on how to fend for himself. His father had been absent most of his childhood, and his mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. By the time he was 16, Ryan was practically raising himself. He'd joined the military right out of high school, hoping to escape the cycle of poverty and violence that surrounded him. And while the army hadn't been easy, it had given him purpose. Now, stranded on this alien planet, that purpose had shifted. Survival wasn't enough anymore. He wanted justice. For himself, for his squad mates who hadn't made it, and for everyone else the war had destroyed. Over the next few days, Ryan fell into a routine. During the day, he scavenged for food and water, avoiding open areas where Vryn patrols might spot him. At night, he set traps using whatever materials he could find: rocks, vines, broken branches. He wasn't sure if the traps would work, but they gave him something to focus on besides the pain in his leg. On the 4th night, one of them finally paid off. A group of Vryn scouts passed close to his hiding spot, their glowing yellow eyes scanning the darkness. Ryan held his breath, pressing himself flat against the ground. The aliens were cautious, moving slowly as they searched for survivors from the attack on the depot. When one of them stepped onto the tripwire Ryan had rigged, the trap sprang into action. A heavy log swung down from above, smashing into the scout and knocking him to the ground. The other Vryn reacted instantly, drawing their weapons and firing, blindly into the jungle. Ryan waited until the chaos died down before moving. He crept closer to the fallen scout, making sure the others were gone before inspecting his kill. The alien's weapon, a sleek plasma rifle, was still intact. Ryan picked it up, examining it closely. It was lighter than his own rifle and fired faster, though he wasn't sure how many shots it could hold. Still, it was better than nothing. He slung it over his shoulder and searched the scout's body for anything else useful. There wasn't much, just a small pouch containing strange, glowing crystals. But Ryan took it anyway. You never knew what might come in handy later. As the days turned into weeks, Ryan grew stronger. His leg healed slowly, though it still ached whenever he moved too quickly. His hunting skills improved, and he became adept at setting traps that could take down even larger groups of Vryn. Each successful ambush boosted his confidence and fueled his growing hatred for those who had betrayed him. He began targeting smaller Vryn outposts, picking off guards one by one until entire units were wiped out. Word spread among the aliens about a ghost haunting their ranks, a human sniper who struck silently and disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, back at the human command center, reports of these mysterious attacks started trickling in. At first, General Alan Hayes dismissed them as random acts of resistance from scattered human units. But when intelligence analyst Megan Cole began piecing together patterns in the attacks, she realized there was only one person capable of such precision: Ryan Carter. She confronted Hayes, demanding answers about whether Ryan had been left behind intentionally. Hayes brushed her off, insisting it was irrelevant compared to winning the war. But Megan wasn't convinced. Something about the situation didn't sit right with her. For Ryan, survival had become more than just staying alive. It was about proving that he was still a force to be reckoned with, even if no one else believed in him anymore. And deep down, he knew his campaign against the Vryn was only the beginning. Sooner or later, he would find a way to make his former squad, and everyone else who had abandoned him, pay for their betrayal. Ryan Carter's body had grown leaner over the weeks. His face was sunken, his cheeks hollow from lack of proper food, but his eyes burned with a fierce intensity. The jungle had become both his home and his battleground. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves, every distant sound carried meaning now. Ryan moved like a ghost, silent and unseen, blending into the environment as if he were part of it. His sniper rifle, worn and scratched from constant use, remained his most trusted companion. He had added the Vryn plasma rifle to his arsenal, learning how to reload and maintain it through trial and error. It wasn't perfect, but it gave him an edge when ammo for his human weapon ran low. The Vryn patrols were growing more frequent. Word of the ghost sniper had spread among their ranks, turning what had once been routine missions into tense, paranoid hunts. They knew someone, or something, was out there, picking them off one by one. Some believed it was a rogue human soldier left behind after the failed sabotage mission. Others whispered about spirits or curses haunting the jungle. Whatever they thought, fear was spreading through their forces. And Ryan fed on that fear. He didn't just kill anymore. He made sure they remembered him. After ambushing a patrol, he would leave marks. A single human boot print pressed into the dirt. A piece of fabric torn from his uniform tied to a tree branch. Even the occasional message carved into bark using the sharp tip of his knife. You can't run. Or, I'm still here. These small acts of defiance became symbols of terror for the Vryn. To them, Ryan wasn't just a man. He was a phantom, a relentless force that couldn't be stopped. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Ryan sat perched in the crook of a massive tree, surveying the area below. His leg still ached, though the wound had mostly healed. Scars crisscrossed his skin where the plasma bolt had grazed him, reminders of the betrayal that fueled his anger. Below him, a Vryn supply convoy rumbled along a narrow dirt path, its engines growling softly in the humid air. This was no ordinary convoy. It was carrying weapons and ammunition destined for the front lines. If Ryan could take it out, it would deal a serious blow to the Vryn war effort. He adjusted his position, gripping his rifle tightly. The convoy consisted of 3 large vehicles protected by a dozen guards. Taking them all down wouldn't be easy, especially since Ryan was outnumbered and alone. But he had learned patience in the jungle. Rushing in without a plan meant death. Instead, he waited, watching carefully as the convoy approached a section of the trail flanked by steep cliffs. It was the perfect ambush point. When the first vehicle passed beneath him, Ryan fired. His shot was precise, striking the driver through the windshield. The vehicle swerved violently, crashing into the side of the cliff and blocking the path. Chaos erupted as the remaining guards scrambled to respond. Ryan didn't give them time to regroup. He fired again and again, each bullet finding its mark. One guard fell, then another, until only a handful remained. They returned fire blindly, their shots tearing through leaves and branches, but never coming close to hitting Ryan. With the convoy immobilized, Ryan climbed down from his perch, moving quickly despite the pain in his leg. He tossed grenades into the wreckage, igniting explosions that lit up the night sky. Flames roared, consuming the vehicles and everything inside them. By the time the surviving guards realized what was happening, it was too late. Ryan picked them off one by one, finishing the job before disappearing back into the jungle. As he walked away, smoke billowing behind him, Ryan felt a strange sense of satisfaction. For weeks, he had fought not just to survive, but to prove that he was still a threat. Now he was doing more than surviving, he was winning. Each successful attack strengthened his resolve and sharpened his skills. The Vryn weren't invincible, and neither were the humans who had abandoned him. Both sides would learn that lesson sooner or later. Back at the human command center, Megan Cole stared at her computer screen, frustration etched across her face. She had spent countless hours analyzing reports of attacks on Vryn forces, searching for patterns. At first, the incidents seemed random, small skirmishes here and there, nothing significant enough to change the course of the war. But as she dug deeper, she began noticing similarities. The precision of the strikes, the timing, the locations, all pointed to someone familiar with military tactics. Someone like Ryan Carter. Megan leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She had already confronted General Alan Hayes about Ryan's disappearance, but Hayes had brushed her off, dismissing her concerns as irrelevant. "We can't waste resources chasing ghosts," he had said coldly. "Focus on what matters." But Megan couldn't let it go. Something about the situation gnawed at her. She had read Ryan's file before he was deployed to Zerath 7. He was a decorated sniper, known for his skill and determination. Leaving him behind hadn't been a mistake. It had been a calculated decision. Captain Laura Dawson had followed orders, abandoning Ryan to save the rest of her squad. Megan understood the logic behind it, but that didn't make it right. She glanced at the stack of classified documents on her desk. Earlier that day, she had hacked into the system to retrieve files related to the mission. What she found made her blood boil. There was a directive buried deep within the records signed by General Hayes himself, authorizing commanders to abandon injured soldiers if it meant ensuring the success of critical operations. It was a policy designed to maximize survival rates, but it came at a cost. Human lives deemed expendable. Megan clenched her fists, her mind racing. She couldn't stay silent any longer. Ryan Carter might have been left behind, but he hadn't given up. His actions on Zerath 7 proved that. If anything, he was fighting harder than ever, not just against the Vryn, but against the injustice of being forgotten. Megan resolved to do something about it. She copied the incriminating documents onto a data chip and slipped it into her pocket. Then she began planning her next move. Meanwhile, Ryan continued his campaign against the Vryn, targeting larger installations and disrupting their supply chains. His reputation as the ghost sniper grew with each victory. Stories of his exploits spread not only among the Vryn, but also among scattered groups of human resistance fighters hiding in the jungle. To them, Ryan was a symbol of hope, a lone soldier standing up to an overwhelming enemy. Some even began leaving offerings at the sites of his ambushes: scraps of food, bottles of water, crude weapons fashioned from whatever materials they could find. Ryan accepted these gifts cautiously, knowing that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Still, the support bolstered his spirit. One night, as he rested in a makeshift shelter hidden deep in the jungle, Ryan thought about the people who had helped him. Not everyone had turned their backs on him. Somewhere out there, others were fighting the same fight, refusing to bow to despair. Maybe he wasn't as alone as he felt. That realization gave him strength. He wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. He was fighting for something bigger, for all the people who had been betrayed, forgotten, or left behind. As dawn broke over the jungle, Ryan packed up his gear and set out once more. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't stop until the Vryn and those who had abandoned him paid for what they had done. The jungle of Zerath 7 was alive with whispers. The wind rustled through the leaves, carrying faint sounds of distant explosions and the hum of Vryn ships patrolling the skies. Ryan Carter moved silently through the undergrowth, his rifle slung over his shoulder and his plasma weapon ready in his hands. He had grown accustomed to the weight of both weapons, their presence a constant reminder of the fight he was waging alone. His body was leaner now, hardened by weeks of survival, but his eyes still burned with determination. Every step he took was deliberate, every breath measured. Word of the ghost sniper had spread far beyond the Vryn patrols. Even human resistance fighters hiding in the jungle spoke of him in hushed tones. Some saw him as a hero, a symbol of defiance against an unbeatable enemy. Others thought he was a myth, a story made up to give hope to those who had none. But Ryan knew better than to let himself believe in myths or heroes. He was just a man, doing what needed to be done. Still, the idea that people might see him as something more gave him a small sense of purpose. Maybe he wasn't fighting only for revenge anymore. Maybe he was fighting for them too. Ryan's latest target was a forward command post deep in Vryn territory. It wasn't heavily fortified like some of the larger bases, but it served as a crucial communication hub, relaying orders between the front lines and the central command. Taking it out would disrupt the flow of information across the region, giving the scattered human forces a chance to regroup and strike back. Ryan had been planning this attack for days, studying the layout of the base and timing the movements of its guards. He knew the risks. There were at least 30 Vryn stationed there, and reinforcements could arrive within minutes if anything went wrong. But Ryan didn't have the luxury of waiting for perfect conditions. If he wanted to make an impact, he had to act now. The night before the attack, Ryan prepared carefully. He cleaned his weapons, checked his ammunition, and repacked his supplies. Then he gathered materials to build traps around the perimeter of the base. These weren't elaborate devices. He didn't have the tools or time for that. But they would slow down anyone trying to chase him once the shooting started. Using vines and sharpened sticks, he created tripwires designed to entangle pursuers long enough for him to escape. When he was satisfied with his preparations, he settled into a hiding spot near the edge of the jungle, watching the base through the scope of his rifle. As dawn broke, Ryan began his assault. His first shot rang out, striking a guard standing near the main entrance. The alien dropped instantly, its glowing eyes dimming as life left its body. Before the others could react, Ryan fired again and again, picking off targets with deadly precision. Chaos erupted as alarms blared and Vryn soldiers scrambled to respond. They returned fire blindly, their plasma bolts tearing through the air but failing to find their mark. Ryan stayed hidden, moving from one position to another to keep them guessing. When the initial wave of panic subsided, Ryan detonated the charges he had planted earlier. Explosions rocked the base, sending flames and debris flying into the sky. Communication towers collapsed and power generators exploded, plunging the area into darkness. By the time the surviving Vryn managed to organize a counterattack, Ryan was already gone, disappearing into the jungle like a shadow. Back at the Human Command Center, Megan Cole sat in her quarters, staring at the data chip in her hand. On it were the classified documents exposing General Alan Hayes' policy of abandoning injured soldiers. She had spent hours debating whether to release the information publicly, knowing it could spark outrage among the troops and potentially destabilize the military's leadership. But she also knew that keeping silent meant complicity in the betrayal of men and women like Ryan Carter. Megan finally made her decision. She uploaded the files to a secure server, encrypting them so they couldn't be traced back to her immediately. Then she sent copies to trusted allies within the resistance movement, instructing them to share the information widely if anything happened to her. With the evidence safely distributed, Megan packed a small bag with essentials, food, water, medical supplies, and slipped out of the base under cover of darkness. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to find Ryan. If anyone could expose the truth and inspire change, it was him. Her journey through the jungle was grueling. The terrain was unforgiving, and the constant threat of Vryn patrols kept her on edge. Megan relied on her training as an intelligence analyst to navigate the dense foliage, marking her path carefully to avoid getting lost. She also left subtle signs behind, scratches on trees, bits of fabric tied to branches, hoping Ryan would notice them. She knew he was out there somewhere, watching, waiting. All she had to do was find him. Ryan, meanwhile, continued his relentless campaign against the Vryn. After destroying the command post, he targeted supply convoys, ambush points, and even isolated scout teams. Each attack weakened the enemy's grip on Zerath 7, creating opportunities for the human resistance to strike back. But Ryan wasn't content with simply disrupting the Vryn war effort. He wanted to send a message to show them that no matter how many soldiers they threw at him, he wouldn't stop fighting. One day, while scavenging for supplies near the ruins of an old human settlement, Ryan stumbled upon a group of resistance fighters. They were wary at first, unsure whether to trust the lone sniper who had become a legend among them. But when Ryan revealed his identity and shared details of his attacks on the Vryn, they welcomed him cautiously. Among them was a young woman named Clara, who acted as their leader. Her hair was cropped short, and her face bore the scars of countless battles, but her voice carried authority and conviction. "We've heard about you," Clara said, studying Ryan closely. "You're the reason we've been able to hit the Vryn so hard lately." "I'm not doing it for you," Ryan replied bluntly. "I'm doing it for myself." Clara nodded, unfazed by his honesty. "Fair enough, but whether you admit it or not, your actions are helping us, and we could use someone like you." Ryan hesitated. He had always worked alone, trusting no one but himself. But as he looked at the faces of the resistance fighters, men and women who had lost everything to the war, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time: camaraderie. These people were fighting for the same thing he was. For justice. For survival. For hope. Maybe working together wasn't such a bad idea after all. Before Ryan could respond, one of the fighters interrupted, pointing toward the horizon. A plume of smoke rose in the distance, signaling another Vryn convoy approaching. Clara turned to Ryan, her expression determined. "If you're serious about hitting them where it hurts, this is our chance. We'll follow your lead." Ryan glanced at the group, then back at the rising smoke. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel completely alone. He nodded curtly, gripping his rifle tightly. "Let's move." Together, Ryan and the resistance fighters launched a coordinated attack on the convoy. Ryan provided covering fire from a distance, picking off guards and disabling vehicles with expert precision. The fighters closed in from multiple angles, overwhelming the remaining Vryn and securing valuable supplies. It was a decisive victory, one that boosted morale among the humans and struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. As the dust settled, Clara approached Ryan, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Not bad for a ghost," she said lightly. Ryan shrugged, though there was a hint of pride in his voice. "Just doing my job." Clara's expression grew serious. "We need more people like you, Ryan. People who won't give up no matter how bad things get." Ryan didn't answer right away. He stared at the wreckage of the convoy, thinking about everything he had been through. The betrayal, the pain, the endless struggle to survive. For so long he had fought only for himself. But now, surrounded by people who shared his cause, he realized that maybe there was more to fight for than revenge. Maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. Not just for himself, but for everyone who had been abandoned. "All right," Ryan said finally, turning to Clara. "What's next?" Clara grinned, her eyes lighting up with determination. "Next, we take the fight to them." The jungle was quiet, unnaturally so. Ryan Carter crouched behind a fallen tree, his rifle resting on the moss-covered bark as he scanned the horizon through his scope. The resistance fighters were spread out around him, hidden in the dense foliage. Each of them had been given specific roles for the upcoming ambush, and Ryan knew their success depended on precision and timing. This wasn't just another hit-and-run operation. It was a calculated strike against one of the Vrin's largest supply depots in the region. Commander Xylar, the leader of the Vrin tracker unit tasked with hunting Ryan down, was rumored to be stationed at this depot. The alien commander was known for his ruthlessness and efficiency, qualities that made him a dangerous opponent. But Ryan saw an opportunity here. If they could take out Xylar and cripple the depot, it would send shockwaves through the Vrin ranks. It might even force them to divert resources away from the front lines, giving the human forces a chance to regain some ground. Ryan adjusted his grip on the rifle, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle over him. He glanced at Clara, who was positioned a few meters away. She gave him a quick nod, signaling that everyone was ready. Ryan took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. The plan was risky. There were at least 50 Vrin soldiers guarding the depot, but Ryan had faced worse odds before. And this time, he wasn't alone. As night fell, the resistance fighters moved into position. The depot was nestled in a clearing, surrounded by thick jungle, its walls illuminated by floodlights mounted on tall poles. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their glowing yellow eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of trouble. Ryan watched them carefully, memorizing their movements. Timing was everything. At exactly midnight, the attack began. Ryan fired the first shot, striking a guard near the main gate. The alien collapsed without a sound, its body crumpling to the ground. Almost instantly, chaos erupted as the resistance fighters unleashed a barrage of fire from multiple directions. Plasma bolts streaked across the clearing, lighting up the night sky like fireworks. The Vrin scrambled to respond, but they were caught off guard, their defenses crumbling under the sudden assault. Ryan stayed focused, picking off targets with deadly accuracy. His shots were precise, each one finding its mark. One by one, the guards fell, leaving gaps in the depot's defenses. The resistance fighters used these openings to push forward, closing in on the compound. Explosions rocked the area as charges planted earlier detonated, destroying key sections of the depot and causing panic among the Vrin. But Commander Xylar wasn't about to let his base fall without a fight. From inside the depot, he barked orders, organizing a counterattack. A group of heavily armed Vrin emerged from the shadows, flanking the resistance fighters and pinning them down. Ryan spotted the movement through his scope and quickly adjusted his aim, targeting the new threat. He fired repeatedly, forcing the Vrin to retreat, but more kept coming. The tide of the battle was shifting, and Ryan knew they didn't have much time. "Clara!" Ryan shouted into his comms. "We need to move now." "We're pinned," Clara replied, her voice strained. "They've got us boxed in." Ryan gritted his teeth, scanning the battlefield for a solution. Then he saw it, a weak point in the Vrin line where reinforcements were still arriving. If they could break through there, they might stand a chance. "Fall back to my position," he ordered. "I'll cover you." One by one, the resistance fighters disengaged from the fight, retreating toward Ryan's location. He provided covering fire, his rifle never wavering as he picked off any Vrin who dared to follow. When the last fighter reached safety, Ryan grabbed a grenade from his belt and hurled it toward the advancing enemy. The explosion created enough confusion for the group to slip away into the jungle. Once they were clear, Ryan led the way deeper, into the forest, putting distance between them and the depot. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs ached, finally collapsing in a small clearing far from the battle. Everyone was exhausted, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. Some bore fresh wounds, bandages hastily applied to stop the bleeding. Despite the cost, the mission had been a success. The depot was in ruins, and Commander Xylar's forces had been severely weakened. Back at the Human Command Center, Megan Cole continued her search for Ryan. She had followed the signs he left behind: boot prints, scraps of fabric, even the occasional message carved into trees. Her journey was fraught with danger, but she pressed on, driven by the belief that finding Ryan was the key to exposing the truth about General Hayes's betrayal. She knew it wouldn't be easy to gain his trust, especially after what he'd been through. But she had no choice. The war needed someone like Ryan, not just as a soldier but as a symbol of hope. One evening, as Megan rested beside a stream, she heard a rustling sound nearby. Instinctively, she reached for her weapon, her heart pounding. Then a voice called, out softly, "Who are you?" Megan froze, recognizing the tone immediately. It was calm, steady, and carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. She stood slowly, raising her hands to show she wasn't armed. "My name is Megan Cole," she said. "I'm looking for Ryan Carter." For a moment there was silence. Then a figure stepped out of the shadows, his rifle trained on her. It was Ryan. His face was hardened, his eyes sharp and calculating. He studied her carefully, searching for any sign of deception. "Why are you looking for me?" he asked, his voice low. "I know what happened to you," Megan replied. "I know they left you behind. And I know why." Ryan's expression darkened, but he didn't lower his weapon. "You're wasting your time. I don't care about their reasons." "It's not just about you," Megan insisted. "This is bigger than one mission, bigger than one person. General Hayes issued orders to abandon injured soldiers if it meant saving the rest of the team. I have proof. It's all on this chip." She held up the data device, her hand trembling slightly. "If we expose this, it could change everything." Ryan hesitated, his gaze flicking between Megan and the chip. He didn't trust easily, not anymore. But something about her words resonated with him. He had always thought of his fight as personal, a quest for revenge against those who had betrayed him. But maybe Megan was right. Maybe this was about more than just him. Finally, Ryan lowered his rifle. "Talk fast," he said, "and make it worth my while." Megan nodded, relief washing over her. She explained everything: the classified documents, the policy signed by General Hayes, and her plan to broadcast the information across all human channels. By the time she finished, Ryan's expression had softened slightly. He didn't say anything for a long moment, lost in thought. "You really think this will work?" he asked finally. "It has to," Megan replied. "People deserve to know the truth. And if we can rally them behind us, we might actually stand a chance against the Vryn." Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. He glanced back toward the jungle, where the resistance fighters were waiting. They had already proven themselves capable allies, willing to risk everything for the same cause he was fighting for. Maybe it was time to stop thinking only of himself. "All right," Ryan said, turning back to Megan. "Let's do it." With Megan's help, Ryan devised a bold plan to infiltrate a heavily fortified Vryn communications hub. If they could access the facility, they could use its systems to broadcast Megan's evidence to every human channel, exposing General Hayes's betrayal to the entire military. It was a dangerous mission, one that required perfect coordination and absolute secrecy, but Ryan knew it was their best shot. The resistance fighters prepared carefully, gathering supplies and planning every detail. Clara took charge of logistics, ensuring everyone knew their role. "This is it," she told the group. "If we pull this off, we'll change the course of the war. But if we fail—" She trailed off, letting the weight of her words sink. And no one spoke, but the determination in their eyes said enough. When the night of the mission arrived, the group moved swiftly through the jungle, avoiding patrols and sticking to the shadows. They reached the communications hub just before dawn, slipping past the outer defenses thanks to Ryan's traps and distractions. Inside, the air was thick with tension as they worked to disable security systems and gain access to the main control room. Ryan covered the entrance while Megan worked furiously at the console, uploading the data chip and initiating the broadcast. Alarms blared suddenly, alerting the Vryn to their presence. "Hurry!" Ryan shouted, firing at the approaching guards. "I'm almost done," Megan replied, her fingers flying over the keys. Seconds later, the screen flickered to life, displaying Megan's message across every human channel. The classified documents appeared along with a recording of Megan explaining the betrayal. Across the planet, and beyond, soldiers paused mid-battle, stunned by the revelation. Back at the command center, General Hayes watched in horror as his secrets were laid bare for all to see. Outside the communications hub, the resistance fighters fought valiantly, holding off wave after wave of Vryn reinforcements. Ryan remained by Megan's side, protecting her until the very end. When the final file uploaded successfully, Megan turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "It's done," she whispered. Ryan nodded, gripping his rifle tightly. "Now let's finish this." Together, the group fought their way out of the facility, disappearing into the jungle as explosions lit up the sky behind them. The jungle was alive with the sounds of chaos. Explosions echoed in the distance, shaking the ground beneath Ryan Carter's feet as he led the resistance fighters deeper into the wilderness. The broadcast had worked. The truth about General Hayes's betrayal was out, and it had ignited a firestorm across the human forces. Soldiers who had once blindly followed orders were now questioning their leaders. Protests erupted within the ranks, demanding accountability and justice. The Vryn, sensing the turmoil among their enemies, launched relentless counterattacks, hoping to capitalize on the confusion. Ryan moved quickly, his injured leg protesting with every step, but he ignored the pain. There was no time to rest. The resistance fighters were exhausted, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that they had struck a blow for truth. Megan Cole stayed close to Ryan, her eyes scanning the trees for signs of danger. She had risked everything to expose the betrayal, and now she wasn't sure what came next. "What do we do now?" Clara asked, breaking the tense silence. Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of uncertainty beneath the surface. "We keep fighting," Ryan replied without hesitation. His tone was firm, leaving no room for debate. "This isn't over. Not yet." Clara nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "We've made them pay, but the Vryn aren't going to stop, and neither is Hayes, not unless we force him to." Ryan clenched his jaw, his mind racing. Clara was right. Exposing the betrayal had been a victory, but it wasn't enough. They needed to strike at the heart of the Vryn occupation, to show both the aliens and their corrupt human leaders that the resistance wouldn't back down. But how? The odds were still stacked against them, and every move they made brought fresh risks. Megan broke the silence, her voice soft but determined. "There's one more thing we can do. If we hit the central command center, the one controlling all the Vryn operations on Zerath 7, we could cripple their entire war effort. It won't be easy, but if we succeed..." Ryan turned to her, his sharp gaze locking onto hers. "If we succeed, we might actually have a chance." The group fell silent, the weight of Megan's suggestion sinking in. Attacking the central command center was suicide, or at least it would have been under normal circumstances. But Ryan knew that sometimes the most impossible missions were the ones that mattered most. He glanced at the others, searching their faces for any sign of doubt. What he saw instead was resolve. These people had followed him this far, trusting him to lead them through hell. He couldn't let them down. "All right," Ryan said finally, his voice low but commanding. "Here's the plan." The journey to the central command center was grueling. The facility was located deep in enemy territory, surrounded by layers of defenses designed to repel even the largest assaults. To reach it, Ryan and the resistance fighters had to navigate miles of treacherous terrain, dodging patrols and avoiding detection. Every step felt like walking through quicksand, the humid air clinging to their skin and sapping their strength. As they approached the outskirts of the base, Ryan signaled for everyone to stop. From their vantage point on a rocky ridge, they could see the massive structure looming in the distance. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter, and armed guards patrolled the grounds. The place was a fortress, impenetrable by conventional means, but Ryan had spent weeks perfecting the art of stealth, and he knew exactly how to exploit its weaknesses. "Listen up," Ryan whispered, gathering the group around him. "We're not trying to take the whole base. That's impossible. All we need is to get inside long enough to plant explosives and destroy the main control room. Once that's done, we'll slip out before they know what hit them." The fighters nodded, their expressions grim but focused. Ryan divided them into teams, assigning specific roles to each person. Clara and a small group would create diversions near the front gates, drawing the guards' attention away from the rear entrance where Ryan and Megan planned to sneak in. Timing was crucial. If the diversion failed, they'd be caught in a death trap. When night fell, the operation began. Clara and her team moved first, setting off explosions near the front gates. The blasts lit up the sky, sending shockwaves, rippling through the jungle. Alarms blared as Vryn soldiers scrambled to respond, their glowing eyes scanning the darkness for attackers. Meanwhile, Ryan and Megan slipped through the shadows, heading for the rear entrance. The path was fraught with danger. Tripwires crisscrossed the ground and motion sensors dotted the walls. Ryan moved cautiously, his knife cutting through wires and disabling traps as they went. Megan followed closely, her heart pounding as she watched for any signs of movement. They reached the door without incident, but getting inside was another challenge entirely. A keypad guarded the entrance, its screen glowing faintly in the dim light. "This is your area," Ryan murmured, nodding at Megan. Megan nodded, pulling out a small device she had salvaged from the communications hub. She connected it to the keypad, her fingers flying over the keys as she hacked into the system. Seconds ticked by like hours, each one stretching endlessly. Finally, the door clicked open, and Megan exhaled in relief. "Let's go." Inside, the corridors were eerily quiet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the walls. Ryan led the way, his rifle ready as they navigated the maze-like structure. They encountered only a handful of guards, all of whom Ryan dispatched silently, ensuring no alarms were raised. With each step closer to the control room, the tension grew thicker, pressing down on them like a physical weight. When they finally reached the control room, Ryan paused outside the door, listening carefully. Inside, he could hear voices. Vryn. Officers barking orders as they tried to contain the chaos caused by Clara's diversion. This was their moment. Ryan kicked the door open, firing his rifle in rapid succession. The officers barely had time to react before they collapsed, lifeless. Megan rushed to the main console, inserting the data chip once again. "I'm uploading the virus," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "It'll disable their systems permanently." Ryan stood guard, his eyes darting between the door and the windows. He could hear footsteps approaching. Reinforcements were on their way. "Hurry," he urged. "I'm almost done," Megan replied, her fingers trembling as she worked. The screen flashed red, then green. "Got it! Move!" Ryan shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the exit. They sprinted down the corridor, retracing their steps as alarms blared behind them. Vryn soldiers poured into the building, chasing after them with relentless fury. Bullets whizzed past their heads, ricocheting off the walls. They burst out into the jungle just as Clara and her team regrouped with them. Together they fled into the dense foliage, disappearing into the shadows as the command center erupted in flames behind them. The explosion shook the earth, lighting up the night sky like a second sunrise. Back at their hidden camp, the resistance fighters celebrated their victory. Supplies scavenged from the depot raids were shared among the group, and makeshift bandages were applied to wounds. For the first time in weeks, there was laughter, a rare sound in the brutal world of Zerath 7. But Ryan didn't join in the celebration. He sat apart from the others, staring into the fire with distant eyes. Megan approached him cautiously, sitting beside him without saying a word. After a long moment, she spoke softly. "You did it, Ryan. You changed everything." Ryan shook, his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not everything. The war's not over. And people like Hayes, they'll always find ways to betray us." Megan hesitated, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe. But because of you, people will fight back. You gave them hope." Ryan looked at her, his expression unreadable. Hope wasn't something he understood anymore, not after everything he'd been through. But maybe it didn't matter whether he believed in it or not. Maybe the important thing was that others did. The next morning, Megan prepared to leave. She had decided to return to Earth, determined to reform the military from within. Before she departed, she handed Ryan a small device containing copies of the evidence she had gathered. "In case you ever need it," she said simply. Ryan accepted it with a nod, though he doubted he'd use it. As Megan disappeared into the jungle, Ryan turned to Clara and the others. "What now?" Clara asked. Ryan gazed out at the horizon, the scars of battle etched into his face. "Now we keep moving forward, one step at a time." And so the legend of the ghost sniper lived on. Ryan Carter became a symbol of defiance, a man who refused to be forgotten, even when the world tried to erase him. Some say he eventually left Zerath 7, disappearing into the stars to continue his fight elsewhere. Others claim he stayed, haunting the jungles and striking fear into the hearts of anyone who dared to oppress the innocent. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. Ryan Carter had proven that even in the darkest times, a single person could make a difference.